Okay. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm a little bit starstruck by the panelists, my co-panelists here. So I'm really thankful for the opportunity. I thought I'd start by just telling a little bit of my own story and my experience with the conversion process. It didn't come from nowhere. My parents, when they were newlyweds, almost 30 years ago, or 31 years ago, they took a trip to Israel and fell in love with the country and with the people and started to explore. And I actually, what Rabbi Novak was saying about Sojourners of the Gate really resonates with, I think, what my parents sort of experienced. They were Bible scholars and felt very rooted in the biblical tradition, and considered converting themselves, and then didn't ultimately, but raised my siblings and I to celebrate Jewish holidays and a bit of a Jewish calendar, really funny, in a suburb of Austin, Texas. And there were no Jews where I lived, so I didn't really know any different. I moved to New York to go to NYU, and very quickly was intimidated by the Jewish community there. There are a lot of Jews at NYU, and the community is very strong, and I'm very blessed to work with the students who go to NYU and utilize that space as their own community, and I feel very privileged to be a part of it. But initially it was scary, and I didn't really have anything to do with Jewish life for a couple of years in college, and then I decided to study abroad in Israel, and NYU opened a campus in Tel Aviv my junior year, so I said, I have to go. This country profoundly changed my parents' lives. And that's what I knew, that's where I wanted to make my own life, eventually. And so as soon as I got back from my semester abroad, which was transformative for many reasons, I met with a few people who now I get to work with in a formal capacity, Rabbi Yehuda Sarna, Rabbi Dan Smokler, and they connected me to the RCA, to a number of resources for me to start my conversion process. The process for me was smooth, and I was already living in a Jewish community downtown at NYU. I got acclimated really quickly. I had a lot of Jewish friends, and the Orthodox community at NYU is particularly strong. So I had people to go to Minyan with. I never spent a Shabbat alone or a holiday alone. Even when friends went home during Pesach or Rosh Hashanah, they would invite me with them, or I would have a place set up for me here in New York. So I feel very, very fortunate to have come into that. And I know that that's not the case for everybody who pursues this process. The RCA was also good to me. My process it seemed pretty transparent for the most part. And I finished in about a year and a half. And again, this is not always a typical case. During my process, I encountered a number of people who sort of opened up my eyes to changes that could potentially be made. And it wasn't until recently, though, that I felt finally motivated to start the Orthodox Converts Network. Unfortunately, it was because of a very, very dire circumstance. I was living in Florence, Italy in the fall, for work, setting up a new project, and when I heard the news about Rabbi Freundel, and I was angry, and I was not personally affected, but I was angry, and I got together with a friend and I said, I know that as converts, we often want to just integrate into the community. The goal is to become a Jew, not to become a convert. But I felt a responsibility to speak up and to have a voice, and I've been really fortunate to meet with many converts or conversion candidates between then and now. We launched the network in December and had our first meeting, and it was a fairly small meeting, but a lot of interest from people all over the world. And then we had a second meeting, which drew a little bit more people and a little bit more publicity. I published a blog post in The Torch on My Jewish Learning, which is Jofa's blog, and that generated a lot of interest. And essentially the platforms that we're sort of running on and calling for, there are four main sort of elements that we want to address with this network. One is we want to make the process smoother by publicizing resources and making those things accessible. There are a lot of resources, including not just books and learning, but people and communities as well. And so we really are aiming to make those more accessible for people. There's no reason why you should have to look so hard to be able to do Jewish learning. Mentorship. I think that a lot of conversion candidates and converts that I learn with and I've spoken with say that they wish that they had only had a person who could be a wing person to them, who had gone through the process themselves, as opposed to just having wonderful teachers and community members who are helpful and helpful allies, but actually somebody who knew what they were going through and could actually empathize. We really hope to work with existing communal leaders to improve the process. I think a very important next step would be to involve more women in the leadership of the process, because within Orthodoxy, it's become increasingly clear that this is really a women's issue in many ways. Most of the people who are converting to Orthodox Judaism are women, and they're young. And that the power dynamic that is created when the process is run solely by middle-aged men is dangerous, as we've seen. So that's really important. Another piece of this is educating communities on how to be productive allies throughout this process, and how to integrate converts once they've had their mikvah and are going to be a part of the community, how you interact with them, how you welcome them in properly. And the last piece is that we hope to meet regularly. We hope that this group of people will come together. We hope to offer guest speakers and lectures and different opportunities for learning together. So I think that those are the big things that I'm working on now within this sphere, and I'm really encouraged by a lot of the things that the two panelists that we've heard so far have said. I think that we're moving in the right direction. And I hope for only more changes and more improvements. So thank you so much for having me.